Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. Prime Minister Imran Khan has recently warned that millions of Muslim refugees fleeing from India could end up becoming a crisis for the neighboring countries such as Pakistan and possibly even Bangladesh if you look at the neighboring countries and their demographics. Now, this is due to the policy decisions that have been made recently in Prime Minister Modi's government in India, which is seen as very discriminatory to minorities, particularly Muslims. And there's been uproar in the country. There's been protests all over the country in student organizations, universities, and different towns, even on the streets. We could see it all on our televisions. And this at the same time while the minorities in India are suffering through this horrendous ordeal, especially the Muslims. Today, December 18th, is observed as Minorities Day in India. We're going to be talking about this with our guests today who have joined us. And also, today, December 18th, is commemorated as the International Day of Migrants by the United Nations. And as we all know that migrant communities exist all over the world, they leave their home countries in order to flee hardships and at times civil wars, economic hardships, water, food, housing shortages, etc. And when they arrive in a new country, they face additional hardships. So we are going to be talking about that as well in detail. In Pakistan today, December 18th, we are observing Kisan Day, and that is due to the fact that agriculture is the backbone of Pakistan's economy. And these very, very hard-working farmers who work in very extreme temperature conditions at times outdoors, they contribute a huge amount to our country. And everything from the food that we eat and to the clothes that we wear, they come from the hard work of these farmers. So we're going to be commemorating them today as well. We have discussed how there's a 5-day polio campaign going on around Pakistan. However, it's been facing difficulties as 2 policemen have been shot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa they were accompanying the polio teams who are trying to administer drops to the children under 5 in that area, because 3 new cases have emerged of infants having polio. Children have become paralyzed. It's a very difficult situation in Pakistan at the moment because polio cases have gone up. They're up at 104 compared to 12 in 2018. And also in another story, Malala Yousafzai, our Pakistani Nobel laureate, has been placed on the last cover for Teen Vogue for 2019 in December. Now, she's being seen as an icon and a symbol of women's rights and girls' education all over the world right now. So that is something that makes Pakistan very, very proud. I'm going to now go on to our first segment, which we're talking about minorities in India, which are facing a lot of hardships. And we're going to be talking about that just shortly with our guests after we see this report.
It is ironic that despite Citizenship Amendment Bill and lockdown in Kashmir, India is observing Minorities Day. Protests are happening all around India against discriminatory policies towards minorities. This day focuses on bringing a better understanding and educating people about the issue related to minorities and their safety. But world is witnessing complete opposite Modi-led India. Since August 5, more than 8 million Kashmiri have been under siege because of the lockdown by India. Indian government ended a special status of occupied Kashmir to change the demography of Kashmir from Muslim majority to Muslim minority. As part of Hindu nationalist agenda, the marginalized India more than 200 million Muslims. Indian Parliament passes discriminating legislation regarding citizenship. Adding the discriminatory measures, Indian Muslims are now required to rely on extensive documentation to prove that their ancestors live in India. Since the Modi-led BJP came into power, plight of minorities has increased many folds, and this move of Indian government observed Minorities Day is a joke of the century.
Right. So we're seeing the state of minorities at the moment, particularly Muslims in India. We have with us in our studio Mr. Khalid Mahmood Abbasi, who is a senior analyst. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Let's discuss this statement first by Prime Minister Imran Khan that the current state of minorities in India, due to Prime Minister Modi's current policies that are going on, and we're seeing the country go up in flames literally a couple of days back. This could create a refugee issue. Millions of Muslims could become refugees in neighboring countries, sir. So your input on that, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Shabin, for inviting me here to talk about the subject which is closer to me. I would like to first of all pay my gratitude to our founding father Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who created this country for us, and all men and women who sacrificed their lives to give us this country where we are sitting as a free citizen today.
Right, so right here I just want to add one thing, because you mentioned Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. I think here in a historical perspective it's very important to add what Jinnah Saab saw at that time when he was a member of Congress, and then he became part of the Muslim League, and why he rallied for a separate homeland. The things that he saw going on over there against Muslim minorities is what culminated in the creation of Pakistan. It was his foresight at that time, right?
Yeah, I think he had the foresight and he could see in the future, and whatever he predicted, it has come true to us. We have got the country and we are living as a free citizens here. Once we see the India today, and the Prime Minister Imran Khan has rightly pointed out at Geneva Global Forum for Refugees that in near future probably there is some refugee crisis are going to happen in the region, and Pakistan is the country which would directly be affected. Now he meant that whatever India is doing, or BJP policies are affecting the minorities in India. Prime Minister Imran Khan is predicting about that. Now, what is happening in India that they have got the bill which is known as Citizen Amendment Bill,
Right.
2019, which has amended 1955 bill, citizenship. Now, it is aiming at all those people who are seeking citizenship in India, particularly from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and they are not Muslims, like Hindus, Parsis, Sikhs and Jains. They would be granted citizenship of India, provided they have entered in India in probably 2014. Now, by implication, what India has done, that India is going away from its basic color of secularism, which Indian forefathers or the founders, they dreamed about a country which would be secular and open to all minorities.
Right,
But
Mahatma Gandhi built
Mahatma
it
Gandhi.
on this basis, and Prime Minister Nehru promised the
Exactly.
minorities equality,
Exactly.
and the preamble of the Indian
Yes,
Constitution
yes.
says that every citizen is equal.
Exactly.
Yet
Now,
we're not seeing that right
What happened to Mahatma Gandhi? We all know that he was assassinated by the member of RSS
Right.
in 1948. Now that highlights the Hindutva mindset of the people sitting there. Since the BJP has come into power, rather before that in 1981, once it was established as a political party, now the religion was made the central point for the politics of BJP. Now every policy revolves around that politics, Hindutva. Now they think that like the many other countries have their own colors, like Muslims have their own countries, Hindus must have their own country. So that is the basic philosophy, and they have built all the policies around this. RSS has a longer history. It was created in 1925 probably by a doctor. His name was Baliram, and initially they thought that it should be aiming at character building, socializing, clubbing, etc. And this is how they attracted the younger lot of India.
At that time was Prime Minister Modi as well. He was very young when he joined the BJP. He was 8 years old.
Exactly.
I mean,
Mr. Modi
RSS,
is the
sorry,
product
yeah.
of the RSS,
Yeah.
Vajpayee, and the other main leaders like this Shaji, who has given this law or the bill, who presented this bill in the parliament, and he is the president of BJP. So Once you do this, you are going away from the basic fundamental of the secularism. Now, why Indian Muslims are apprehensive? Because all other minorities, they have been accommodated in that citizenship bill. What they are apprehensive that this is how they are going to target Muslims, as they are targeting in Assam. Now, what they are doing in Assam is that prior to this bill, they had a citizen register. They started registering the citizens, and interestingly, they came to know that the majority of the Hindus were not registered. So they came up with the idea of this amendment, and this amendment has been passed, and I've heard that this has been challenged in the Supreme Court as well of
Okay.
India. But we do not hope any good decision from the Supreme Court of India, because we have seen the decision of Supreme Court in Babri Masjid.
Right. Now we have online with us Ambassador Ghalib Iqbal, who's going to be discussing this issue with us as well. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador. Sir, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, sir, I would like to ask you this and begin with this, that we are discussing right now how Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that there can be a refugee crisis in neighboring countries due to Prime Minister Modi's policies in India right now. And we perpetually see, when we discuss this in Pakistan on our media, etc., the Indians criticizing that why doesn't Pakistan, why do they talk about us, pay attention to what's happening in your country. However, this can have huge repercussions for us, because the Kashmiris, for example, or if there's a crisis there with the lockdown and we start seeing refugees here, we already host 3 million Afghan refugees. So, of course, it is a matter of concern for Pakistan as well.
It's a huge concern for Pakistan, because what India has done is, as the Prime Minister rightly says, that this is a fascist government in India, and it's unfortunate that they have resorted to measures which are going to go beyond the boundaries of India. It is going to impact not only in Europe and North America, but other parts of the world also. And this chaos which he has created, it is going to go from country to country. It's going to become an international chaotic situation, for which ultimately the UN will have to intervene to stop all these things happening in India. The refugee crisis is a very possible thing, not only for Pakistan, but I think for Bangladesh also, and it's going to create problems for both the countries. We are already hosting a large number of refugees, and if you see that more people are going to come from there, but at the same time, when you look at the act, what it says is that if any Hindus living in another country want to come back, and they'll be accepted as citizens over there. So primarily what he has done is that with one stroke he has created issues for the neighboring countries and countries beyond the region also. And these things are going to impact not only the bilateral politics between India and Pakistan, but regional and ultimately global. And the world
if there is, I'd like to now cut in and ask you this. If there is a huge influx of refugees from, say, Indian-occupied Kashmir into Pakistan, what would Pakistan have to do in such a situation?
So the first thing is that Indian-occupied Kashmir has been captured by India. Okay, it is forcefully captured by India. There is a legal terminology which we should always use while referring to the Indian-occupied Kashmir. It's a captured area under the occupation, under the forced occupation of India. If people are coming from there to Pakistan, I think you are forgetting one thing, that people living in that part of Kashmir, which is forcibly occupied by India, they are already in the midst of a freedom struggle. They're not going to give it up. If they can die for their freedom, they are willing to go ahead and do whatever is possible. Rather than entering into Pakistan, they would like to regain the territory which has been forcibly occupied by India. So, but at the same time, you would have the women and children and old people coming to Pakistan. That is a big issue for Pakistan. We do not have the resources to look after so many people. But as our brothers and sisters, of course, we'll open our arms for them. But logistically, economically, it's a nightmare for Pakistan. It's a nightmare for any country. In fact,
Right.
even if America was next door from India, and this was the situation, it would be a nightmare for America too.
Exactly. Sir, also now this issue is creating certain tensions with Bangladesh, between India and Bangladesh as well, because the Muslim population in Assam, now if they lose their citizenship and they're put into those internment camps, if Bangladesh has to face an influx of refugees, they've got already about 1.3 million Rohingya refugees there already. So naturally, they're also concerned about this issue happening.
Of course, it would happen if there is any other country which is bordering India and there is such a situation. I think all the countries would be worried. Bangladesh is worried because they not only have a large number of refugees already living with them, but they foresee that in the near future they will be compelled to get more refugees coming out of India. Now, this is again the same situation economically, logistically, politically. It's a nightmare for Bangladesh also. But the ultimate reason for the whole thing is the fascist policies and thought process and mindset of the Indian leadership, including the Indian Prime Minister, the Interior Minister, and other members of the cabinet. These people have actually destroyed the balance of power among the citizens of various countries. They have taken their fight, they have taken their madness beyond the boundaries of India. And this is going to have the communities of India and Pakistan, and they are going to fight in countries abroad. They are going to have a fight in European countries. They will be fighting with each other in North America. They will be fighting with each other in GCC countries. And these are the things which is going to create further problems for the host country where these people are living. So
Absolutely.
one or two people, if they do not have a sensible mind and if they do not have that ability to rule and run a country in a way, in a statesman way, that is the time when situation starts going wrong. And in
Right.
India, the situation has started going wrong. As
Absolutely.
I was reading, there was a statement which said that this is the beginning of the end of India. I would not say this is the beginning of the end of India. I would say they have used this act as a catalyst for the end of India. And this is
Right.
going to have very negative repercussions for all the people in their country and beyond that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sir Ambassador Ghalib Iqbal, for joining us online on our program. Now I'm going to come back to Mr. Khalid Mahmood, who's right here with us in our studio. Sir, now we've heard what the ambassador said and the refugee potential issue that could be created for the neighboring countries. We also saw that the UN Secretary General lauded Pakistan and Turkey for hosting such a large number of refugees. Turkey, we've seen, has about 3.6 million Syrian refugees. And President Erdogan and the Turkish government has said that because the international community did not help in this crisis and they had to handle it all by themselves, and there was no aid, nothing to help those refugees. That is one of the reasons why they had to take action in the northern part of Syria. So it has so many different repercussions in the areas where these crises happen. So it needs to be averted before it actually takes place.
Absolutely. I would second Mr. Ghalib, whatever he has said, that it is not limited to India now, it has gone out of control. And I think the other countries who are directly being impacted are, first of all, is the Pakistan, which has long boundary with India, geographical boundary. Then the other country is Bangladesh. And on that front, if you see the situation in Assam, in Bihar and other parts of the India, people have started protesting against this, and that protest is turning into violence. and up till now I think 5 people have already been killed.
Right.
Now the implication
And we
for
saw
Pakistan,
with the student riots, students
Yes.
have actually been shot. That's what the
Exactly.
hospital authorities are coming out and saying now, that
Yes.
the students who have come in with bullet injuries.
As if it was not enough in Indian held Kashmir, where the people are besieged for the last I think 4.5 months now, and they are without any connection with the outer world, and we know their conditions. They are short of food, they are short of everything. Your question about refugees in Pakistan, Mr. Ghalib has rightly pointed out that those are the people who are struggling right from 1947 or 48 to have their independence and have their right of self-determination. Why would they come to Pakistan? They would rather like to die there for their own homeland rather than coming to Pakistan. And may I mention it here that Pakistan is already hosting about 3 million refugees, Afghan refugees here for the last about many decades. Now, and out of those 30 millions, 1.4 million are only registered. And we have seen the bad effects of that refugee crisis here in Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And our society is suffering from that crisis. And it is very unfortunate that the international community is not coming forward. To me, at this stage, I think the people who matter, the superpowers who matter, they should have some conference, some meeting, and they should get together and stop India or their leadership from implementing such type of policies.
Right, and naturally if there is, God forbid, such a crisis,
Exactly.
then the whole world will have to shoulder the
Exactly.
responsibility. Thank you so much, Mr. Khalid Mahmood Abbas, for joining us on our program today. Now we're going to go on to the next topic that we have. It's about the December 18th being the International Day for Migrants, observed by the United Nations every year. Now we know that there are millions and millions of migrants all over the world in different countries, coming from different parts of the world, whether they're due to civil wars or harsh economic conditions, and for a multitude of reasons, economic opportunity, shortage of water, food, housing, etc. Now we're also going to be seeing a growing number of migrants due to climate change. So let's have a look at this report and then we'll discuss this topic with our guests.
Migration, in the case of human beings, is the act of moving from one place to another, mainly moving from a country of origin to a new country to start new lives as permanent residents in their new home. International Migrants Day is an international day overseen on the 18th of December, which was appointed by the General Assembly of the United Nations on 4th of December 2000, after having taken into account the large and increasing number of migrants in the world. International Migrants Day is observed throughout many countries, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, through the spread of information on human rights and fundamental political freedoms of migrants, and through sharing of experiences and the design of actions to ensure the protection of migrants. Migration has been a courageous expression of individuals' will to overcome adversity and to live a better life. Today, globalization, together with advances in communications and transportation, has greatly increased the number of people who have the desire and the capacity to move to other places.
Right, so we've seen how the plight of migrants all over the world, we've had a look at that, and we're going to be talking now with Ms. Rana Rahim, who is the Country Director for the International Center for Migration Policy. Thank you, ma'am, so much for being with us on our program today. This is a very important topic right now in the world that we see. We are seeing migrants in all different countries due to all different reasons. We're seeing a migrant crisis in the United States. Now we're seeing it in other parts of the world as well. So as your role as a country director for this organization, what do you think right now is the most important step that needs to be taken to keep in perspective the issue of migrants and how they need to be treated and the hardships that they face?
Migration is definitely not a new phenomena. This is something that has been happening for a very long time. Migrants have built nations, migrants have contributed to their countries of origin as well as to their countries of destination for hundreds of years and continue to do so. It just so happens that today, in this highly sort of securitized world where the emphasis is on strict border controls, that we see a very different perspective or a greater awareness and social political awareness of migration. And in this context, I think it's even more important that we focus on the contributions of migrants and we ensure that their rights are protected. So ICMPD was created to make migration safe and orderly and regular. And this ICMPD does through migration dialogues, through capacity building, through research, through policy advice and policy development. And one of the things that we do, particularly in Pakistan through our migrant resource centers, is to raise awareness. I think the most important thing today is for migrants to know their rights, to be able to make informed decisions. They need to be aware of where they're going, what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, and also to be fully aware so that they can better protect themselves.
And be aware of what they're going to face. We also now have with us online Mr. Tammy Dullur, who's who's an international consultant and he's a journalist as well as a filmmaker, and he's the director of the Meta Story Institute and senior lecturer of applied science in the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Hello. Good to join you.
I'd like to ask you to begin that we're talking about migrants. Today is International Day for Migrants, and it's a very important topic because we see migrants all over the world, and at times we also see crises like you've seen in the United States recently. Migrants are coming to a different country for a purpose. It's usually due to religious persecution or mistreatment or some sort of economic or other life hardship, and then they're often persecuted and face hardships where they end up. So your comments on this, sir?
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me. Of course, migrants have been with us all through history, and we found that, and we still see that migrants move because of many reasons, and you just mentioned some of them. Many are good reasons, for economic reasons, but also for safety reasons. They are fleeing persecution, like you say, and sometimes a disaster or war, as we've seen in Syria, for instance, where many of the refugees have fled, but also, of course, in your own country, where people have come for many decades now from Afghanistan and from other regions. And of course, Pakistan has been very generous in having all these migrants. We call them refugees, so they are there for a special reason. But of course, we know that from Pakistan and from other nations, people are going somewhere else to work often and to build new futures.
Right. So, sir, how can developed countries now help the situation of underdeveloped countries where you have influxes of migrants from, so that their situation is improved, so that, it's not an easy thing for a person to leave their homeland and go to an entirely new place where they're an outsider and have to settle their family, and they have to face a lot of hardship, and a lot of times we've seen discrimination as well.
Yeah, that is true. And for instance, in Europe, which I know best, we have had an influx of migrants and refugees recently, and actually, as the European countries are getting older and grayer, the generations, we see the population of so-called source nations of migrants have very young populations. So it is also a matter of supply and demand of people and workforce, an exchange between, for instance, Europe and Asian countries. And of course, there needs to come a change in thinking about migrants. We've seen so much discussion recently and even discrimination and racism surrounding the issues of migrants, even in Europe, but also I understand in your nation. And this is it's not a productive and a long-term perspective at all. We need to change our ways and look at migrants in a much more positive way, where both supply and demand of people and force, and also in that way of futures, can be exchanged between the different nations.
Please stay with us. I'd like to now add Ma'am Rana, who's with us in the studio, that like you were saying earlier, that migrants often contribute a lot to the country's economy, and as far as, you know, the fields of science, technology, etc. You see them in the West, they're doing very well in the medical fields and all of that. So they actually do contribute a lot to the host countries where they arrive. So that needs to be acknowledged as well, right?
Absolutely, and with the focus on you know, irregular migration, we lose that. You know, we forget the contributions that migrants make.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things to counter that is to ensure that migrants make informed choices and there is more regular migration, because we've also seen the tragic consequences of irregular migration. You know, the depths that migrants will go to just to move to a different country for various reasons, whether it's because of, you know, conflict at home, whether it's, like you said, climate induced, or for whatever reason, primarily for economic reasons. But they have to be able to make informed choices, and also make sure that when they're leaving the country, that they do so with legal protection.
Right. Mr. Delorna, I'd like to ask you, ma'am just mentioned climate reasons. Now, we are seeing a huge climate change, you know, greenhouse effect induced crisis all over the world. We know that there's going to be climate induced migrations going on in the future. How do we plan, and how should we plan to accommodate this? Because many regions of the world are going to become uninhabitable.
Yes, well, of course, we don't know exactly how all this climate change will impact all of our societies globally. But we do know that most of the refugees and migrants that come from regions where the climate effects are very important, that they stay actually in the region. So, for instance, in Africa, we see that most of the people moving because of climate reasons, they stay within Africa. And I don't know exactly how this is with Asia, but I know on Europe, the consequences of the climate changes haven't really hit the migration debate. We see people come to Europe, especially now from the war zones, and coming from Africa for many economic reasons that are there. And of course, in there is people that are not migrants only, but they are refugees seeking asylum in these states. And I think Europe has to think through how we look at asylum seekers for climate, with climate reasons to flee. So this could be drought, of course, and poverty caused by climate change and the other effects that are there. But this discussion will have to take off to a new level, really, in Europe. That's what we see.
Right, absolutely. Ms. Rana, now I'm going to ask you this, that you're here in Pakistan and your work is to sort of prepare migrants for what they're about to experience. Now, we've seen that many migrants end up in foreign countries where they've sort of been told lies or duped into going for a certain job or for labor, and they end up in a completely different situation. We've seen cases of human trafficking, forced marriages, etc. So how are we preventing things like that from occurring?
Well, you know, the government here is also developing a number of sort of, you know, policy frameworks and structures to deal with some of these issues. They're also looking at, you know, the policies that they had in the past and updating them, you know, to meet these kind of changes that are happening. And ICMPD has been assisting the government, particularly the Ministry of Overseas Pakistanis, to develop a comprehensive immigration policy that will not only promote migration from Pakistan, which is one of the priority areas for the government of Pakistan, given, you know, the huge population, and particularly the huge youth population. So, you know, employment overseas is something that the government of Pakistan uses as a tool to deal with unemployment. So these policies, as well as, you know, raising awareness amongst the migrants themselves, and also assisting the institutions that are looking into the law enforcement agencies that are actually countering or migrant smuggling and human trafficking. We're also assisting them. Even the government itself is taking steps to strengthen these institutions. So these are some of the ways in which the government is being quite proactive in dealing with this situation.
Right. Okay. At this point also now, Mr. Duller, I'm going to direct a question to you that you mentioned earlier that Pakistan is already hosting 3 million Afghan refugees over here, or migrants. Many of them have settled here as well. First of all, I just want to clarify what the difference between a refugee and a migrant exactly is. And secondly, I'd like to ask you, as far as the situation you're seeing in our neighboring country, India, where you're seeing now a lot of people there's uprisings due to the perception of, the persecution of Muslims over there and other religious minorities. So Prime Minister Imran Khan has said in Geneva that he feels that there could be a potential refugee crisis in Pakistan due to that, or in Bangladesh. So your comments on this, sir?
Yes, of course, this is a very special situation for Pakistan. Now, let me make clear that there is a big difference between migrants and refugees. Migrant is a much broader category of people that are moving from a place to another place, and this can even be within Pakistan. Then you can be called a migrant if you're leaving your location. But most of the times we understand that as a person going across a border to settle somewhere else in a new environment. A refugee is somebody that is seeking asylum by obtaining a legal status to stay in a country because he or she is persecuted for whatever reason in their home countries. And so through the asylum procedure will seek a permanent residence or temporary residence, like many of the Syrians have done and many of the people from other countries have done. And I understand also that now there is tension with the new law in India, and Prime Minister Khan expressing his worries that many people will start fleeing and coming as refugees maybe to Pakistan from India and from the special regions that you mentioned. So this is what we see in many regions, that people become actually almost a bargain between different states and are forced into a political game being played with. And this is totally something that we should try to avoid by any means. And I really hope that the international diplomacy and wisdom of the national leaders of the different states involved will do their ultimate best to not let people become the play game and the playground and their lives being at risk because of international conflicts. They should be solved by another way. And we should make regular migration the standard norm between nations. And that is the way to go forward, because we cannot stop migration in general, and we should not, because there's good reasons, as we explained, for people to wanting to do that.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Tammy Delor, for joining us from the Netherlands. And now, ma'am, Ms. Rana Rahim, now I'm going to ask you a final question that seeing the situation in our neighboring country, that there could be a migrant issue starting from there, because not necessarily you can say, that we're going to have an influx of refugees. Maybe that will happen too. But there are already people in Indian occupied Kashmir who, due to the lockdown and curfew and all that they're facing, yes, they're very determined to fight it out. But a lot of them have applied for visas to Pakistan, they want to move, etc. So how should Pakistan approach this? Now, how can you be better prepared for it?
Well, this is something that is difficult for me to say. It's more, it's more of a political decision by the government of Pakistan on how they respond to this. I'm a proponent of open borders, even though I know that in this day and age that's not a possibility, perhaps in the future at some point. So I would certainly open the doors to within limits to those who want to come to Pakistan and welcome them, as we have in the past done with our neighbors in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So welcome them with open arms, which is what
Absolutely.
Pakistan has always done, especially for our Kashmiri brothers and sisters. Thank you so much, Ms. Rana Rahim, for joining us today on our program and for your valuable insights. Now we are just going to mention how December 18th is observed as Kisan Day, which means that we are giving credit to the farmers in Pakistan for all the hard work that they do, because agriculture is the backbone of Pakistan's economy, and the farmers don't get nearly enough credit for all of this work and the input that goes into what they produce as far as the food that comes on our table and the clothes that we wear. It all comes from these farmers. So the aim of Kisan Day is for us to pay tribute to farmers and give them the acknowledgement that they need for being the people who uphold the economy. Also, this initiative was started by Sarsabs, that's a company under Fatma Group, a fertilizer company, and now it's being observed all over the country as Farmers' Day, Kisan Day today. And this day is dedicated, it's a dedicated day to pay tribute to farmers all over Pakistan, and many of them, I'd like to add, are women, because a lot of women go and work on farms, especially where cotton harvesting is concerned. So I'd like to reiterate that our appreciation goes out to all the farmers who work in Pakistan to provide us for our essential agricultural needs. That's all the time we have for today's program, and we'll see you next time on Newsroom. Thank you for joining us.